is that, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So what happens is that the project establishes kind of a time-driven cadence. And we start figuring out, as a team, how much we can build in each one of those little time boxes. And we start measuring how much we can build in each one of those little time boxes. Okay? And that helps our projects become predictable over a period of time. Okay? So time management on Agile projects really has to do with deciding when you need to be in market, breaking that time period down into intervals, and then measuring how much that we're able to build in each of those intervals. Okay? Questions? Okay. So, cost management. Well, so now if I know if my team size is largely fixed, does anybody think this looks like a couple of like fried eggs or something like that? When I first made that slide, I didn't really catch that, and just total useless information, right? My wife likes Overwell eggs, right? And one time I cracked her some Overwell eggs and I made it. I'm like, wow, that looks like the diagram from my slide. So anyway, so the general idea with Agile is that you have this concept of a team, right? This is one of the hardest things that I think most traditional organizations face when they adopt Agile. Because they're still kind of in this mindset that we're going to allocate people with a specific set of skills to the project at some percent allocation, and we're going to start measuring, how much they're on. And it becomes important because I got to know they're on 50%, they're on 25%, this person's on 80%, they have this kind of burden rate. We start tracking all this stuff, and we have all these ways of kind of understanding where everybody is. And it's because we have all this specialization in our organization. We have functional silos in our organization. So a lot of times when I go into a group, I try to hit people with this really, really head on. Because I was a consultant for version 1 for a couple years. And I would go in and I would train people on this stuff. And I'd do like Agile immersion courses, and I'd show them how to use the software, all this kind of stuff. And I would get in with these folks that what was generally happening is that they would be assigned to 5 or 6 different Agile teams, right? And you think about when you start talking about iteration planning and daily stand-ups and stuff like that, and you're assigned to so many different teams, it doesn't make sense. Right? So what Agile's doing is it's asking us to put a team together that is responsible for delivering software on those increments that we just talked about. Okay? And when you do that, the cost associated with building that software largely becomes predictable over time. So I've got 6 or 7 people assigned to a team. They've got a particular burn rate. Okay? And they're building software. So now I can start to measure how much software they're building. I can start predicting their costs in a very lightweight, simple way. Okay? And now I can tell when I'm going to be done. Okay? Operates in cycles like that. So it's pretty simple managing costs on an Agile project. Again, I'm talking kind of simpler, team projects. What I'm drawing here is multi-teams that are kind of nested together. Because that's another thing with Agile that we talk about is that org design and how you structure, which tends to be my passion. I'm talking at the Better Software Conference this year, also the one in Orlando and the one in Vegas in a couple weeks, about scaling Agile into complex enterprises. And this is what Israel Gatt's kind of sweet spot is as well. The structure that you have in your organization is key to a lot of the fundamental metrics that we care about on Agile teams. Okay? So to get costs simple, to get costs predictable, we want to put together a team of people that is responsible for delivering an increment of working software. And then you can start thinking about teams, multiple teams, teams of teams, kind of like in a roll-up within the overall organization. Okay? You guys are a really quiet audience. I want some feedback here. You guys, does that not throw anybody in the room off? Is that not totally incongruent with how your organizations are structured today? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's what's hard about this, right? So we go in as a consultant and we say, hey, this is Agile, right? This is velocity, this is burn down, this is story points. Maybe we can go in and we can drop in good engineering practices and continuous integration and all these kinds of things. And what I find is what a lot of teams are doing is that they're getting that stuff in, And then the organization asks them the next question. And for me, the next question is, when are you going to be done? Okay? They want predictability. Okay? And if you can't do this kind of a team in Agile, that kind of predictability is pretty hard to get. Okay? So what you got to do, and this is why it's so important to have senior leadership involved when you do your Agile transformation, because you've got to be able to make some of these changes within your enterprise so that you can create these teams, that they can largely be responsible. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule. Deliver increments of software every couple of weeks, and we can start measuring progress. We can start measuring costs in very, very simple, straightforward ways. Okay? Putting Agile in the absence of that kind of a team-based framework is very, very difficult. Okay? So I just want you guys to know that. It's hard. So now you start asking yourself, you start saying, well, okay, Mike, that's great, but what am I going to build? How do I build in increments? How do I build in thin slices? What do I do with these requirements? Now, that's another thing that gets kind of challenging that you have to figure out how to do within your organization. Anybody ever come out of like a RUP environment, use use cases, anything like that? You guys? Okay, cool. So there's not an exact one-to-one mapping here between like use cases and user stories, but I think that sometimes it becomes a useful distinction or a way of talking about it. So what we do is that we talk about requirements on Agile projects in thin slices of application functionality. So a lot of times, traditional projects, traditional product organizations will get big documents like MRDs and PRDs that say the system shall behave in this way and it shall behave in that way. Maybe we get some wireframes and things like that. But what Agile's asking us to do is it's asking us to create our requirements as functional threads through the application. Okay? So we want to have something like, I come out of an online banking and bill payment organization. That's where I did kind of my large Agile stuff. And we would do things like make a payment. So I could describe the screen to make a payment. I can do all this detail about making the payment. But what I want to be able to do is things like, I need to be able to log into the system. I need to be able to query for an account balance. I need to be able to create an account so I can assign a transaction to that person. I need to be able to cancel that transaction. These are kind of the behavioral things we want to start thinking about our requirements in. Okay? And so I draw the use case metaphor because I think it's useful, because a lot of times what we would do is we'd think about something like a high-level use case, something that the business really cares about, something that actually has value, like a value story. We call those value stories in Pillar. Something that has value. And then you can decompose that into a series of behaviors. The behaviors can kind of be decomposed into primary and alternate scenarios. And those things have different value, different priority within the system. And then what we do is that at the highest level, now we can start talking about the breadth of scope. Okay? We don't need to know the depth of everything that it is that we're building. But we can say the system generally needs to do these kinds of things. This is kind of the architectural system framework that it's going to imply. And then, as we start peeling off the user stories out of it, or the scenarios in a use case model, or system-level scenarios, that kind of a thing, like developer stories, we can start building those and exercising the application, and start measuring what it is that we're going to build as we go. Okay? Any thoughts? Any questions? And so if I put this back into kind of PMBOK PMI language, it's, gosh, you know, they're already starting to talk about writing PMBOK 5. I haven't even fully read PMBOK 4 yet. Anybody actually read PMBOK 4? Yeah, a couple. Oh, you guys are hardcore, man. So I have actually read PMBOK 3. Okay, and so PMBOK 3 talks about what? Progressive elaboration, rolling wave planning. So now you want to start talking to your PMOs about what you're doing, right? So now we can talk about the need to manage uncertainty. We can start talking about our time boxes. We can start talking about our teams as a way to control cost. And now we can start talking about ideas like progressive elaboration and rolling wave planning. We can start talking about dealing with the breadth of scope, because I do believe we owe our businesses some idea of when we're going to be done. Okay, what are we kind of going to get for our money? We just have to be able to inspect and adapt at the smaller level. right? Would anybody buy a house without kind of knowing how much square footage, whether it's going to be 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, however many baths? Those are the kind of decisions that we want to make. We can defer the decisions about our software, like our carpeting and our paint and things like that. Okay, so what we're doing in our software projects is we're starting off, this is the biggest screen, I am telling you, that we're dealing with the breadth of scope first on our projects. Okay, again, we've fixed time, we've fixed cost. Those are our 2 primary constraints. Now we're figuring out how to deal with scope. And what we're going to do is we're going to deal with the breadth first. We want to understand the nature of the problem. And then as we iterate through those time boxes, we're going to get more and more detailed about how it is that we're actually building software. Okay? Make sure I got the right slide next. Excellent. So the interesting thing, and this gets straight into what you asked me just a minute ago. If I can start off with some high-level understanding of the breadth of what it is that I'm going to build, okay, and I'm going to understand the breadth of the technical solution. I'm not going to do detailed design. Might be like kind of just high-level, big block, kind of architectural kind of stuff. We're going to have a little bit of an idea of how we're going to solve this thing. And then we're going to very strategically on our projects pull out those thin slices, call that breaking down the backlog maybe, grooming the backlog. We're going to start pulling out pieces of functionality that we can build, and we're going to start building things that mitigate risk really, really fast. So we're going to go in and we're going to start figuring out what are the large technical unknowns, what are the big business value problems that we're trying to solve, and we're going to start pulling items, we're going to start creating our backlog for the release in a very risk-driven way. And we want to mitigate business risk in the sense of, are we building the right product? And we want to mitigate technical risk in the sense of, do we know that there's a feasible solution that we can actually build? Okay? And so by doing that, what we do is that we narrow the cone of uncertainty on our project. And we converge on a solution that gives us the optimal business outcome. Okay? So rather than create documents, designs, requirements, all those kinds of things that we kind of think mitigate risk on our projects, what we're going to do is very tactically, very strategically, pull those scope elements out that enable us to actually build the software, learn from building the software, converge the requirements, get uncertainty out. Okay? Like a lot of times when I do training classes or talks, and I better not talk too much because I don't know how this one's going to quite work out. But you can always end a talk on time. You can always end a training course on time. Okay? You do it by inspecting and adapting as you go and trying to get to the end of the time having delivered the most value you can possibly deliver. Okay? And that's how I'd ask you guys to think about scope on Agile projects. It's not that we just go in and say it's a total crapshoot, because we're communicating with our business, we're going to let them know. But you know what we're also going to do? As soon as we figure out that one of those assumptions is wrong, or that we can't get the business value out of the product that we thought, or that there's some huge technical unknown that's going to have a huge impact on time and cost, we're going to go back to the business very early, and we're going to give them the option to make an alternative decision. How many times do we put our businesses in the situation where we get 90% of the way through the project, we go to integrate everything, kind of like what Michael Ma was talking about in the keynote talk, where we go to integrate everything, we go to test, and then defects just go through the roof. We have integration problems that cause refactoring issues and all these kinds of things. That's because integrating late and testing late is a very late risk reduction strategy. So what we want to do is we want to pull that risk reduction out early. Okay? So we vary scope on Agile projects by doing just this. Deal with breadth, pull out things very tactically, reduce risk. What do you guys think? Yes, sir?
I mean, I have been to different kind of Agile seminars where like the scope, like what to pick and when to pick and which order to pick.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard basically two kind of sides of the stories. One is you pick the highest value to the business.
Mm-hmm.